Project risk management is one of the project management knowledge areas. We have 10 knowledge areas in project management: integration, scope, cost, schedule, quality, resources, communication, stakeholders, risk management, and procurement management. And we have 49 processes in project management. 7 of them is for risk management. And if planning is 24 processes, 5 of these processes is happening during the risk management. This is Ahmed Al-Qutb, and we are still talking project management. What's our topic for today? We're gonna develop the probability matrix, develop the impact matrix, and develop the heat map that will be part of the risk management plan that will be ultimately part of the project management plan. It will help the project manager later on to quantify or perform qualitative risk analysis for the risks that he will be identifying. Project risk management. Project risk management is part of the knowledge areas that we have in the project management. Since we have 10 knowledge areas, one of them is the risk management. Risk management, it has 7 processes out of the 49 processes of the total project management processes, and it exists in 3 process groups. Just let's go back quickly. We have 10 knowledge areas, 5 process groups, and 49 processes. The 5 process groups are initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, and controlling, and closing. Now, from the 49 processes, we have 7 processes are related to project risk management. What are the processes? 5 of them will happen during the planning process group, and 1 process will happen during the executing process group, and 1 will happen during monitoring and controlling. Our focus today is not just to go over all the processes. We're going to just take one part of the project risk management plan, because we said that the project manager has a role which is planning the project. And one of the sub roles that he has, it's to plan how to plan. Since the project manager will be, during the planning of the risk management, will be identifying risks, performing qualitative risk analysis, performing quantitative risk analysis, and planning risk responses. That's his planning part for the risk management. He needs to have a tool that will help him in order to be able to identify the risks, perform qualitative risk analysis, perform quantitative risk analysis, and performing risk responses. So the project manager will be planning how to plan in his project risk management plan. And one of the topics or the tools that we're gonna develop today, it's gonna help the project manager in performing qualitative risk analysis and performing quantitative risk analysis. The project manager cannot develop the project management plan by himself. He requires the contribution from different stakeholders in order to help him in developing the project management plan. And since risk management plan is part of the project management plan, so key stakeholders within the project, they will contribute to the risk management plan throughout instructing the stakeholders' risk appetite. And it will be expressed as a measurable risk threshold around each objective of the project. We're not talking about the general objectives of the project. We're talking here about the project risk objectives. So the stakeholders, they will determine what's going to be my project risk objectives. Is it going to be the schedule? Is it going to be the cost? Is it going to be the community, environment, safety, quality, scope, whatever? So they will be defining that this is going to be my project risk objectives. And then they will define what's going to be the appetite or the threshold of each project objective. In another word, it means what's going to be the acceptance level and what's going to be the non-acceptance level. Threshold, sometimes we explain it as how much is too much. And definitely they have to say that this is going to be the too much for us, and that's going to be the acceptance level to us for every threshold. Then define the overall accepting risk exposure within the project, and that's going to be the stakeholders' appetite. They will be defining the project objectives, and they're going to define the thresholds, and these thresholds will be as a measuring tool or measuring element that they will use in order to determine the risk exposure within the project. Risk exposure, it means how severe is that risk in the project. The appetite will give us the guideline on how we're going to define the risk exposure of our risk within the project, which risk will be identified as a severe risk and which one will be defined as an acceptable risk. After we collect the stakeholders' appetite, tolerances, and risk project objectives, the project manager and his team, the project management team, they will start to determining what's going to be my probability matrix and what's going to be my impact matrix according to the instructions that's been dictated from the key stakeholders. Or maybe I can have a template, or I can have something from the existing processes that I have within the organization as part of the governance, or as part of the procedures that the organization has, which is how I'll be able to define the risks, or how I'll be able to set the probability of the risks within my risk management process. The project manager and his team, they will start either selecting it from the existing system, or they can specifically define and generate a new probability matrix for that project. Now, that probability matrix can be as simple as 3 levels: low, medium, high, or it can be as a medium complexity by saying very low, low, moderate, high, or very high. Or it could be go up to 10 levels by saying that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 levels, 20 levels, 30 levels, and that's going to be a little bit complex, and that gives a variety. But most of the risk probability matrices are using either the 3 levels, but the more precise, or more, let's say, accurate or close to reality is the 5 levels, where we see very low, low, moderate, high, and very high. The probability matrix will tell us what is the likelihood of the risk to happen in the project. So if it's very low probability to happen, is it low probability to happen? Is it moderate probability to happen? Is it high probability, very high probability to happen? And if you see, we have set different colors for it. Very low, low, it means these are a green risks and they are accepted. Medium, it is a risk that I have to pay attention for. And the reds are the risks that I have to, I should be worried about. They are red because the severity will be different when I'm using the heat map later on. It will show me a different severity when I have a probability of the risk has a probability of the risk to happen is high. The likelihood of the risk to happen is high or very high within the project. Now, we use the probability matrix at this scenario, or in this pattern, for the subjective analysis. So when it's based, when we start quantifying the risks later on, or performing qualitative risk analysis, what we're doing, actually, we are doing a subjective analysis for the risk. So we're going to use the heat map, either a simple one, or a complex one, or a medium professional one, or realistic one, in order to qualify the risks by knowing what's the probability, what's the likelihood of the risk to happen in the project. Performing quantitative risk analysis, it's more objective. Objective, it means we are using science over there. And in order to be able to be more objectives, we have to turn the subjectivity into a range of probabilities into my probability matrix. If you look in front of you, we have the low, medium, and high as a probability matrix that will be subjectively used by just simply saying it's a low risk, or moderate risk, or high risk. But if that's subjectively, but if we would like to be an objective, can perform an objective analysis for our risks, we have to include numbers over here. Because later on, when we go to the quantitative and the qualitative risk analysis, there's a formula we use. We called expected monetary value and expected time value for the project, where we have to use the percents over there in order to come up with a contingency, or in order to determine what's going to be the severity of the risk on the schedule and the severity of the risk on the budget, on our budget. So as an example, the team can say that the low, it means between 5 to 15%, medium from 16 to 25%, high from 26 to 50%. Now, when we say the word probability, it means it starts from 1 to 1999. That's the probability. 0, it means it has no probability. 100, it means it's a fact. It's not a risk anymore. Risk, it means it might or might not happen, and it has a probability of happening or not happening. So if it has a probability of 100% to happen, that's not a risk anymore. And if it has a 0 probability to happen, it means it will never happen. So the probability, it ranges between 1 to 99. But in order to be more realistic, if something has an even chance to happen in my project, we call this a high risk because it's a 50-50% to happen or not to happen. So it has a high probability to happen in my project. So usually most of the risk consultants or risk practitioners, they will stop until the 50%, and they believe that anything that happens at 50% is considered to be high to my project. So let's take the other probability matrix where we have said we're going to use 5 parameters in order to evaluate the risk: the very low, low, moderate, high, and very high. We will see that anything that less than 5% is considered to be very low. Anything between 5% to 10% is considered to be low. Anything between 10 to 25%, that's considered to be medium or moderate. Anything that happens between 25 and 50%, that's considered to be high. Anything that's beyond 50% is considered to be very high. And that's why I told you that the 5 parameters probability matrix, it's more realistic, because now I can identify between the risks that they have an even chance to happen and the risks that they have more than 50% to happen in my project. So I'll turn the subjective words, which is the low, moderate, high, very high, medium, and so on, I turn them into figures of a probability in order to be able to use in the quantitative risk analysis, which is science, and it is more objective. The risk probability matrix can be tailor-made to a specific project, or we can use the organization process assets in order to know what is included within the organization framework as a probability matrix. Now, usually it involves the support of the subject matter expert, SMEs. And also we can base it on historical information that are analyzed, and risk occurrence is determined according to how or what's the likelihood of the risk to happen, how many times it occurred in a similar projects. For example, we might say that if it happened 2 occurrence in every 10 projects, that's at 20%. If it's 5 occurrence in every 100 projects, that's 5%. So the subject matter experts or the project management team, they have tools in order to determine how the probability will be explained. Either it will be explained in a simple percentage between that much and that much, or it could happen in the number of occurrences within the project and then can be transferred into percents that will be used in the quantitative risk analysis, because again, the quantitative risk analysis, it's more objective and it's depending on science. So this is how the risk probability matrix will look like, and I'm giving you 2 examples of 2 different methodologies that have been used. The first one is the low, moderate, high, and we said we're going to depend on the occurrence of the risk within the project. If the risk is happening 5 times in every 100 projects, or it occurred between 10 to 30 times in every 100 project, or it's appearing or occurring between 30 to 50 times within 100 projects. So this is an example we can use. We can replace the 5 into any number and the 10 and the 100 to any number, and then we will be able to define our probability matrix. There's another way we can also express our probability matrix. As an example, very low, moderate, very low, low, medium, high, and very high. For example, I said subjectively, I'm going to use the following terminology: very low, rarely to happen in the projects; low, sometimes to happen in the project; medium, occasionally happening in the projects; high, frequently to happen in the project; very high, always happening in the projects. So this is another way of expressing the probability matrix, and it will be very easy to refer to when we are performing the qualitative and the quantitative risk analysis during the planning process. And we can also express it in then less than 5%, 5 to 10%, 10 to 25%, 25 to 50%, and more than 50%, and that's going to be from very low to very high. If you see that this is what the project manager is doing, he's planning how he will be planning later on. So he is developing the probability matrix in order to be able to use it once he starts performing qualitative risk analysis and quantitative risk analysis for his project later on, which is going to be part of the planning anyways. Risk as a definition, it is the probability to happen in the project. It's an event. It might or might not happen within the project. And if it's to happen in the project, it will have a positive or negative impact on my project. So the characteristics of the risk, that it is an event, it is a probability, and it is an impact. Therefore, we have built up a probability matrix, then we need to build up an impact matrix in order to be able to perform qualitative risk analysis and quantitative risk analysis to our projects later on in order to know how severe are the risks. So again, we're going to develop a risk impact matrix, and that risk impact matrix can be tailor-made for that specific project, or we can use the organization process assets and see what we have in the organization processes and systems and framework, how they are identifying or determining the impact matrix. So again, let's take an example. One of my project objectives, now I'll perform the risk impact matrix is performed for the project risk objectives. One of my project risk objectives, as an example, let's say it's the schedule. And in order to say that this risk is considered to have an impact in my project and the impact is low, anything that will consume 10% of the project contingency when it comes to the schedule. If the schedule has, for example, it's a 3 months contingency into its schedule. So if any risk happen that will use 10% of the risk, then if the risk happen and it will consume 10% of my project contingency, I will consider it to be a low risk. But if it gonna consume between 10 to 20% of my project contingency, then I'm gonna consider it to be medium. If it's gonna consume 20 to 50% of my project contingency, I'm gonna consider it to be high risk. That's a way of defining. What I'm trying to do over here, I'm trying to define what does it mean risk to me as an impact when it to come to my project risk objectives. Another example, yes, when we define the impact matrix, we have to define both for the positive risks and the negative risk. If the positive risk is a threat and the negative risk is an opportunity. So if I'm defining for the threats, I have to define it as well for the opportunities. Now, if you define the threats, you're going to use the same definition or the same parameters that you have set in the threats, you're going to use the same in the opportunity, but only for the example purpose and the illustrating purposes, I'm going to use a different methodology of defining the impact matrix for the schedule. As an example, if it has 2%, it will have less than 2% to impact my schedule, the total project schedule. That's going to consider a low risk. But if it's going to be between 2 to 4% of the total project schedule, that's going to be a medium risk. If it's going to be between 4 to 6% of the total project schedule, then I'll consider it to be high. Just remember, I'm just giving two different examples, but if you define the threats, you're going to use the same definition to the opportunities. So the two examples over here just only for the illustration purposes. It doesn't mean that I have to give two different definitions for the threats and the opportunities, one for the threats and one for the opportunity. Once you define one of them, the other one will be mapped and it will be cloned immediately, copy paste, and it will be the same. Now this is a schedule, this is an impact matrix that has 3 levels, and this is an example of how we present it. Now let's say I'm using 5 parameters, not only 3 levels. I'm using the very low, moderate, high, and very high. 5 levels of the risk impact. And let's take an example right now on the cost. For example, I can say that if the risk that happened that will be less than 5% impacting my contingency, that's going to be considered a very low risk for me. But if it has between 5 to 10%, that will be a low risk. As a contingency, it means it's going to consume only that much of my contingency. If I have $5 million as a contingency, anything that between 5 to 10% of that contingency as a risk, if the risk, it will have an impact. The risk, if it happened and it's going to have an impact of that much on my project, between 5 to 10% of the contingency, I'm going to consider it to be low. If it's going to be between 10 to 25, that's going to be a medium risk. Again, it's only 10 to 25% of my contingency. And if it's between 25 to 50%, that's going to be a high. If it's more than that, more than 50% of my contingency, I'll consider it to be very high. Now, again, you have to, once you do the threats, you have to do the opportunity as well. If you do the threats, you just copy paste it to the opportunity, and it will be okay. But again, only for the demonstration purposes, I'm going to give you another example on how to develop the impact matrix. I can use this kind of methodology to define the impact matrix. For example, saying anything that will impact the less than 1% impacting the project, the whole total project cost will be considered to be very low. Anything between 1 to 2% is considered from the total cost of the project will be considered to be low. Anything between 2 to 3%, that will be considered as a medium. Anything between 3 to 4% that of total project cost, that will be considered to be high, and anything more than 4% will be considered very high for me within my project. So this is how the impact matrix will look like. We have schedule impact, we have cost impact, and you do the same for every risk, objective. Project risk objective. For example, if you are planning to have the safety, for example, as a project risk objective for you, you can say that the very low impact in my project, it means it's only near miss. Low, it means first aid. Medium, it means injury that requires to go to the clinic. High, it's to be hospitalized. Very high, it could be disability or fatality. So this is how we explained, in order to be able later on to know what's the severity of the risk, or what's the severity of the risk impact on my project throughout using the impact matrix. If we are planning the probability matrix for 3 levels, then the impact matrix has to be 3 levels. In another word, that the same number of levels that we are developing the probability matrix, it will be the same number of levels that we are supposed to be developing the impact matrix. 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5. Why? Because this will help us in developing the heat map. If we are using the 3 levels of probability matrix and 3 levels of the impact matrix, and this is how the heat map will look like. We will have the probability on the top, and on the left side we will see the impact, and in between we will have the low, medium, high, and low, medium, high for the probability and the impact, and we will set different colors for these. Now these different colors, they mean that they will be explaining the risk severity for me, and I'll be using this in order to determine how severe is the risk for me. And in the coming slide, I'll explain what does it mean green, what does it mean yellow, and what does it mean red, and how it will be calculated. Therefore, if I'm planning my probability matrix and planning my impact matrix, in order to be able to develop the heat map, they are supposed to be equal in the number of the levels. 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, 10, 10, 20, 20, whatever is going to be the probability levels, it has to be equal to the impact levels. Risk is uncertain event. If it's to happen in the project, it will have a positive or negative impact to my project objectives and my project deliverables. And one of the deliverables that we have explained was the schedule, and the other one was the cost. And we have completed the threats. Likewise, we have to do the opportunities as well. And opportunities are the positive risks that they are happening in the project, and they're going to have a positive impact to my project. Likewise, we draw the heat map. You will see that we have 3 levels of the heat map: the light blue, the dark blue, and the navy blue, and each one of them represent a risk severity. We did not change much from the threats or the previous example that we have. Again, we plan the threats like exactly, it will be the same. If we are planning, I said if you plan one of them, the other, if you plan the threats, the opportunities will be exactly the same. You don't need to create a different levels or different definition of the levels and the opportunities different from the threats. That's actually not correct to do. If you are explaining the threats or defining the levels of the threats, these the same going to be the level of opportunity, and I'm going to keep the same example that we have used previously for the threats. Now let's give definition to the colors that we have drawn in the heat map. And this is a definition example, 3 examples of 3 different definitions. We said again, either you can tailor-made a special heat map for a specific project, or you can use the organizational process assets in order to know what kind of heat maps this organization or the organization that you belong to is using throughout the frameworks, throughout the systems in the organization. But let's take an example over here. We'll see that the green, in the first definition option, we said that the green could be low risk, the yellow is a medium risk, where the red is a high risk. A different definition we could have for the risk by saying minor risk, medium risk, severe risk. Green is minor, yellow is medium, and the red is a severe. Or you can say low risk for the green, important risk for the yellow, critical risk for the reds. It's back to the organization which kind of definition they would like to give to the risks and the severity of the risks, and how they would like to present it in the different tables. Because by knowing these colors and knowing the risks definition as a severity, later on the management of these risk severities has to be part of the roles and responsibilities for the project manager, the risk manager, and the risk owner and the action owner, and that will be again part of the risk management plan that has to be defined as well. Likewise, again, once we define the threats, the negative risks, we have also to identify the suitable tools as well for the opportunities, which is the positive risks. And we have here in the, what does it mean, the light blue, dark blue, and the navy blue. Again, we can call them as a definition low opportunity, medium opportunity, high opportunity, or we can call them negligible opportunity, potential opportunity, extreme opportunity, or we can call it low opportunity, important opportunity, or critical opportunity. Again, these definitions that we're giving to the risk severity will be determining how we're going to manage these risks later on when it comes to their colors and how they will be presented in my risk register. In order to be able to use the probability matrix, the impact matrix, and the heat map, we need a risk register. Let's say that this is a risk register template in front of us where we have the risk event, the probability, the schedule impact, the cost impact, and the risk severity or the exposure, risk exposure. Let's start populating this risk register, and we'll start with risk number 1. We will say that during pipe welding, fire might be started causing major damages to the existing facility. Risk number 2, on-shelf items procured might be late delivered, causing activity suspension and idle resources. Risk number 3, hiring qualified resources will improve the project progress. Risk number 4, synergizing activities between different projects in the organization will improve the procurement power of our organization. For demonstration purpose, I have included 2 positive risks and 2 negative risks for us, and you will see that risk number 1 and risk number 2, they are negative risks. Why? Because they have a negative impact on our project, while 3 and 4 are representing positive risk. Why? Because they have a positive impact on our project. After we have identified the risks, now we need to perform qualitative risk analysis for it, and we'll start with asking what's the probability of the risk to happen in the project. So risk number 1, during the pipe welding, fire might be started causing major damages to the existing facility. From the probability matrix, we will review and see which best fits our risk. If we would like to describe the probability of the risk, which one of these 3 best fit the risk probability? Is it occurring less than 5 times in every 100 projects? No. Is it happening 30 to 50 times in every project? No. Is it occurring between 10 to 30 times within a 100 project? Yes. I believe this is going to be a medium probability to the project. What about risk number 2? Well, risk number 2, it's on-shelf items procured might be late delivered, causing activity suspension and idle resources. It's a shelf item anyways, and usually shelf items are usually easy to replace. I believe it's going to be low, and it's rarely happening in the project. It happens 5 in every 100 projects, so I believe it's going to be low. What about risk number 3? Risk number 3 is a positive risk, because from the way we are describing it, narrating it, it seems like it's going to have a positive risk because it will improve the project progress throughout hiring qualified resources. So from our experience, from our understanding, how often it will happen, what's the likelihood that such a risk could happen and improve the project? Well, that has a high probability to us in every 30 to 50 projects, in every 130 to 50, in every 100 project it's happening. So I believe it's going to be a high probability for us. And the last fourth risk, which is again, it's a positive risk. Synergy between the projects in the organization will improve the procurement power. From my experience, it's rarely happening, and it happens only 5 times in every 100 projects. So that's going to be a low probability. What we have done over here, we have selected the probability or determined the probability of every risk. Risk number 1 has a probability of medium. Risk number 2 low, risk number 3 is high, and risk number 4 is low. How we did that? Throughout discussing the risk and comparing it to the probability matrix. This is what we have done. We have discuss the risk and we compare it to the probability matrix that we have established, and this is just an example for us. We can use any other probability matrix that we have talked about, but again, just to demonstrate how the discussion goes and then how we will end up defining our probability for every risk, whether it's positive or negative. Now let's use the impact matrix, and we're going to start with the schedule because this is the first that we have in our column. And during pipe welding, fire might be started causing major damages to the existing facility, and that actually will delay us a very long time, and that's going to be between 4 to 6%. Why? Because if the facility that we're working in has fire has started and we are damaging the facility, we have to stop the project activities. Therefore, it's going to be something between 4 to 6% of my project schedule, and that's going to be high. Okay, what about the other risk, which is the idle, the on-shelf items that is procured and it will be late delivered? Well, that's usually something that is negligible, and it's between 2% of my project, so it's going to be a low risk for me. What about the opportunity? The opportunity here is high qualified resources will be improving the project progress. Well, if we have a qualified resources, they will improve my schedule more than 4 to 6% on the project schedule because they are qualified resources. They can do the job faster and they can do it more economical. So I believe that that's going to be a 4 to 6% project schedule. What about the synergy between activities? Yep, if we are to synergize, we're going to have a very good economy of scale, and it will improve our procurement power, and it will improve our procurement power in front of our suppliers and vendors, and they will be giving us a better lead time, a better delivery schedule, and I believe it's going to be 4 to 6%. Again, what we have done, we have discussed the impact on the project throughout reviewing our impact matrix and see how that risk will impact the project. Now let's see how it will be demonstrated for cost. We open the discussion again for the impact on cost, and the risk 1 is during pipe welding. The impact is going to be high. Why? Because it costs us between 20 to 50% of our project contingency. If such a risk happen and fire is started and we are damaging the existing facility, it will cost us between 20 to 50% of our contingency, and that's considered to be a high risk for us. What about the on-shelf items? If it's to happen, that's going to be minimal cost, because if you are exchanging on-shelf items, what's going to be the difference that you will inquire from the idle resources, or how long the resources will be idle, and how easy it is to replace the on shelf? I believe it's low, so we're going to keep it low. Now the opportunity number 3, which is risk number 3, which is an opportunity. How much it will save me if I'm hiring a qualified resources, how much the improvement that I will have on the cost? Well, that's not going to be much. Why? Because you are hiring more qualified resources. It means you are paying them more. Yes, they will do the work more efficient, but if you take the difference between them being efficient and how much they are paid, that's going to be a low improvement on the project. So it's going to be low cost impact on my project. And let's see now risk number 4, synergizing activities between different projects in the organization will improve the procurement power. We said it's going to have a high impact on the schedule, but what about the cost? Well, the cost is going to give us a better discounts, but that could be between 10 to 20% of the project contingency, and I believe that's going to be my scoring for the cost impact as an impact. So again, we have discussed our way throughout reviewing the risk and compare it to the impact matrix of the cost in order to determine what's going to be the impact severity on my project. Last thing to do right now is to use the heat map. How we're going to use the heat map? Now we still have the risk number one, which is during the pipe welding for a fire might be started and causing major damage to the existing facility. It has a medium probability, and it has a high impact for both for the schedule and for the cost. So it doesn't matter which one we're going to select, whether it's the schedule or the cost, it will be the same because both of them, they have a high impact. So if we go from the probability moderate to the impact high, they will intersect in this red area, and this is considered to be a red risk for us. Risk number two, which is the on-shelf items might be late delivered, causing activity suspensions on either resources. And you will see that in the probability is low, schedule impact is low, and cost impact is low. So the probability is low with an impact of low, and that's going to be a green risk for me. So we have now one red risk and one green risk. Risk number three is an opportunity. So we're going to use the different heat map that with the blue colors. And if we look into the risk number three, it's hiring qualified resources will improve project progress. As a probability, it is high, but the schedule impact is high where the cost impact is low. So let's do, first of all, definitely we have to select the highest of both of the cost and the schedule, because we cannot have two different colors for the same risk as a severity. So we're going to select one of them, which is the highest impact. So the probability is high where the impact on schedule is high and the impact on the cost is low. So we're going to select the one that's in the schedule because it is the highest than the low. And if we use the high probability, high impact, and that's going to be a navy blue color. But if you would like, just for a demonstration purpose, if you would like to see how it will be demonstrated in the heat map for the cost, it will be a low high probability but a low impact, and that will be in this color. But since the high is schedule, so we're going to select the as a severity, it will be a navy blue. What about the last risk? The last risk is a positive risk as well, and it has a low probability, high impact, and medium impact. Schedule high impact, cost is a medium impact. Again, we're going to use the we're going to select the highest one of them. So the probability is low, but the impact is high, and it will be in this color. But if you would like to demonstrate the cost, it will be low and medium, and it will be in the light color. Since now the high is better than the medium, or the highest than the medium, we're going to select low and high, and it will be a dark blue. So this is how it will be represented in my risk register. We will have the first risk, it's going to be a red risk. The other risk will be, the second risk will be green, where the third will be dark navy blue, and the fourth risk will be blue. What does that mean? We go back to the risk management plan and to the earlier defining what does this color mean. And for example, we'll see that we have defined that the navy blue is a critical opportunity, where the red is a critical risk, and for the dark blue it's an important opportunity, or it's an important risk, or low risk, or it is an important risk, whether it's a green or light blue. So this is how we use the qualitative risk analysis. What we have done is qualitative risk analysis for the project risk.
Planning is one of the roles of the project manager, and plan how to plan is a sub-role. Today, we have developed the probability matrix, the impact matrix that will be used later on during the project planning in order to perform qualitative and quantitative risk analysis. In this video, we have just strict the explanation and the learning tools that we had for the qualitative risk analysis, but during our PMP training courses we help you to prepare yourself for the quantitative risk analysis and how to tackle it in the exam. Unfortunately, this is the end of our video, but it's not the end of project management on our YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe, like, and press the notification to receive every new video. Don't forget to follow the links that you have under this video in order to know how we can help you in preparing yourself for the PMP.